Hey Max, it's Jade with a important video for Grounded. The PTB, the 1.1 update, a holiday treat, is now live, and there's some really big changes that you need to know about. Now, some of you guys might be more excited about up zipline, or bigger inventory slots, or a lot more of the cosmetic items. But the real game changer, something that's really going to change the way that you play the game, is the massive differences in mutations and combat now. A lot of players will now have unlocked a lot of mutations since Grounded's been out a while. But more often than not, a lot of these mutations haven't necessarily worked that great, or they have worked so well that everyone's chose the same ones. So what have they actually done? Well, they've added mastery levels to the mutations. Generally, how a lot of these mutations worked, particularly the ones with combat, was that if you was using an axe, you had a chance to stun an enemy. And that chance would increase whatever level you gained. So level 1, it might be 5%, level 2, 10%, level 3, 15%. And that's just an example, you get the idea. But that has all been rewritten. Mutations have been revamped completely. Effectively meaning that combat will be a lot easier now when you start actually activating all your mutations. So it makes it even more important that you unlock as many mutations as possible by getting as many of the milk molars. And now more than ever, it's worth it getting to stage 3 and basically mastering some of these combat mutations to give yourself the best boosts and buffs. Stage 3 Little Fist means you'll be hitting 2 hits in 1. So I'm going to explain all of that as well as the requirements to get them and how good it is now. Now the Little Fist is kind of similar to what it was before, except you guarantee to always get that damage increase now, where it was still only a chance. It was actually 25, 15, 75% chance depending on level. So without the mutation, you can see I'm doing minimal damage with my fists. Now look at the difference when I've turned the mutation on. And you can see I'm really going to town on just this ladybird here with some massive jumps. And remember, it stacks, so every punch that you do while in combat is going to get better and better as long as you are still in combat. So that doesn't apply to even just one bug, that applies to whatever amount of bugs are fighting at you. Look out for the buff below your scab. As long as that's there, you're going to be doing more damage. So it's effectively great for taking on crowds of creatures now. You can really do a huge amount of damage to some of the bugs as long as they actually stay and fight, unlike these ants. Now there may be some tweaks and changes to it. It is only the PTB, but at the moment that's what it is. So it is better, but some people might not notice it at first. Kill 40 creatures to get level 1, kill 100 to get level 2, and kill 200 to master the Little Fist. Use this with stamina boosting properties or armors for the best results. So moving on to axes, mastery. If you used to use this, you got a chance of staggering enemies at 5, 8 and 10%. Now every time you hit a creature, you're reducing its resistance to chopping, bashing, slashing and stabbing damage. Now obviously as long as you keep on using your axe, you're basically making your chopping damage more stronger against that creature while you've got that buff. But it looks like in co-op, if other players are also using different types of damage, you're still all going to be doing a lot more. Now I want to say that if you attack a creature with your axe, then switch to maybe a stabbing weapon or hammer, you should still be able to go ahead and do more damage, as in theory you should have already lowered the bug's resistance. So I'll look into that a bit more and test it in multiplayer, but for sure the stamina boost is great. When you run out of stamina from attacking creatures, you'll instantly gain your stamina back. That's why it's going to be worth getting this up to level 3. You only gain this new stamina boosting buff at level 3 mastery by killing 200 creatures with axes. Now normally that doesn't happen unless you've got other mutations on. It just simply isn't that quick normally. The only thing it's not going to work with is running. If you become exhausted through running, it's still going to take the same amount of time to regen. This only applies to your stamina replen in combat. Unless anything's changed, it's going to be 40 kills for phase 1, 100 kills for phase 2 and 200 kills for phase 3. That's pretty much the same for all of these combat mutation level ups. Kill the creature with that weapon to get these new bonus ones. Using a hammer previously used to be able to slow down creatures with a percentage chance. 15%, then 25%, then 30% chance at level 3 of the mutation. But now you'll always get a 100% chance to slow down creatures every time you use a hammer to hit one. Once you activate level 3 and master it, you'll get a 50% increase in stun damage when you actually hit creatures, meaning you can take a huge amount of chunks out of creatures' health using what effectively was just a tool. It should make easier work also of stunning things like Black Ops beetles and more. Spears used to work a bit like how axes work now. Whenever you attack something, it would reduce the resistance of that creature. But that's been chucked out. You still get the same amount of damage for throwing your spear at a creature, so they haven't nerfed that, it's still pretty OP. Instead, they've also added a brand new thing that when you attack a creature, you'll get a buff that reflects 25, 50 and 75% of damage back to a creature. So effectively, the more that you're attacking, whenever they try and hit you, they're going to actually get more damage back. This is called Thorns, and you might have seen it from a few meal buffs, although one of them requires black ant eggs, and so they are pretty much a myth in the game. So I guess many people haven't actually realised that Thorns is viable for a lot of things. You can get level 1 Thorns, but yeah, I bet a lot of players don't ever use that kind of meal buff. It lasts about 5 seconds, and effectively means when you're attacking with that buff, you're going to do more damage. You can see it starts as soon as I start hitting, and it replens every time I get more hits in. So you can pretty much go Fury mode, and if you do manage to get hit, it's going to mean your next strikes on the creature are going to do more damage, as long as you've got that buff applied. There's also a one final buff. If you actually charge and throw spears now, you'll get even more damage. Although it looks like at the moment in the PTB it's not necessarily working that well, as I couldn't really tell much of a damage difference just by throwing it straight away, or indeed going ahead and charging it. But what it's meant to do is deal 30% more damage. Daggers used to work that every level would give you an extra 5% increase in getting a chance for bleed damage. And then you would do 100 damage for 10 seconds at any level. Well, now you'll do bleed damage with every single hit. Now this ability doesn't stack, and instead though you're going to do bleed damage for 30, 50 and 75 damage over 5 seconds. So level 1 seems like a nerf, but don't forget you're going to trigger this every attack now instead of a random chance. So it's 60 damage for 10 seconds. But level 2 is going to give you 100 damage for 10 seconds, so just like it used to be. And level 3, you're going to get 150 damage over 10 seconds. When you master the ability, again by killing 200 creatures, you'll take away any of the creature's bleed damage resistance by 25%. Meaning it becomes really easy to stack up and do a lot of damage with the bleed effect. Even just using an unupgraded bone knife means you can do a huge amount of damage now. Enemies are going to just suddenly drop dead before your eyes, no matter how far they try and run away. You see that one hit on that fire ant has took away so much health. Now remember, it doesn't stack, so if you're in a crowd of creatures, you want to really hit one and then move on to the next one. That's going to be the best way to use this brand new mutation. Keep rotating and eventually they'll all just die of the bleed damage. But of course if you do wail on one big one, you can absolutely decimate a creature. Honestly, it's made these weapons seriously OP. Apply a poison damage to a dagger, or get one of the poison daggers. Looks like it also applies when you throw your dagger at creatures too. Now Sharpshooter's probably had a great buff, although some people might still feel a bit grumpy about some changes. You can now block with your bows, which is amazing. And to me it makes it absolutely more viable to use a bow shot, rather than absolutely relying on standing everywhere and cheesing, or having to run huge distances to get shots off so that you don't get attacked by creatures. So what's changed? At level 1 of the old Sharpshooter, you had a 5% chance to go ahead and root creatures. It would slow them down for a couple seconds, and that increased to 10 and then 15% for each level. But now instead, if you pull off a correct shot, you'll get a small increase in your stamina usage for 5 seconds, and this will be 50%, 75% or 100% depending on what level you are. So you'll reduce how much stamina you're using as long as you are pulling shots off. So for players that like to still run around and try and evade enemies even without them getting close, it's still going to be really viable because you're always replenishing your stamina, or you're at least stopping it from going down. Just remember that sometimes you have to run again to get the actual full effect. If you're already sprinting, it might not necessarily do so. So your best bet is to stop and take a shot and then start sprinting afterwards, rather than continuously running and shooting at the same time. Now there is one nerf to this, although some people might view it as a win. So this is a bit of a weird one. If you master the Sharpshooter, your elemental arrows will now start doing actual effects. Previously it's meant to be that if you fired a spicy arrow, it would burn for damage over time, but now that won't work. Instead you have to get to level 3 in Sharpshooter for it to take effect. You can see now its health is trickling down. Spicy will burn for 50 damage over 5 seconds. Fresh will slow down a creature by 30%. You can see it's working pretty effectively there, with the ant not able to really move as much. So hopefully the idea is, if you get a shot off when an enemy's attacking you, you can slow it down so that you can hopefully get away. And Sour adds an additional 10% stun damage. In some ways it's good, but in other ways it does feel like a bit of a nerf. But the reason they've probably done that is to counteract the fact that you can now block with bows as well. So the overall package still makes Sharpshooter and using bows more effective than it used to be. But certainly if you're just looking at mutation descriptions, it might seem like a bit of a huge nerf. So there might not be any point in crafting lots of elemental arrows until you get to obviously stage 3 of Sharpshooter. So what about clubs? Well, previously you got a 15, 20 and 25% chance to enter rage mode in combat, and that would be indicated by the little screen, the edges going red. This would mean that you do extra damage 20% at all levels. But it did mean that sometimes you couldn't perfect block that well. A lot of the time it just wouldn't work. More so though while you were actually in rage mode. So what happens now? Well, you're guaranteed to get a 100% chance every time you hit a creature you're going to go into rage mode instead of only a procedurally generated chance. The first level you only get 15% damage increase, the second level 20, and then if you master it you get 25% damage increase. But it does mean you won't be able to perfect block at all now. So they've kind of kept that the way it's meant to be. So what's the bonus of it? You'll do huge damage with your club swings now, pretty much going full on barbarian mode. Put that with a really tanky armor set, or even the ladybug armor set as well, and you've got something really good. One thing you'll also get is, while you're in rage mode, you will now gain 1 HP per second. This also scales with healing receive buffs. So again, if you're wearing the ladybird armor, you're going to regenerate even more health over time, especially if you're using anything like some of the trinkets that can also gain you extra health. So yes, it's a slight nerf in how much damage output you're doing at levels 1 and 2, but kill 200 creatures, you do more damage, and you're going to be gaining that extra 1p health per tick. And again, the crucial thing is, you're guaranteed to have the barbarian mode activate now instead of only randomly. Swords used to give you a chance to reduce your stamina consumption 5, 10 and 15% when you were swinging your weapon, meaning that you could swing and hit creatures quicker. Instead, now when you hit a creature, you lower their attack damage by 10, 20 and 30%. Also, when you hit an enemy with a sword, it's going to give you a temporary buff that lowers your exhaustion timer by 90%. So it's pretty similar to the way that the axes work. While you're in combat, your stamina should replenish almost immediately. Best case scenario, two-handed swords, i.e. like the Great Antlion sword and the Spice Katana, is going to be much better to use that now with this mutation. Just remember though, that exhaustion recovery only lasts for a few seconds, so make the most of it. Don't forget about it. If you do run away and then come back in for another attack, you'll have to trigger it again by hitting the creature. And remember, just like the Axe one, it doesn't work if you're just running around using that mutation. It can only be applied in combat. Your stamina won't replenish immediately. So staves have changed as well. This has probably been one of the biggest ones that's received a lot of attention during 1.0 obviously. They were too weak when they first launched. Then they buffed it a little bit more to do more damage, but it turns out a lot of the buffs originally, they weren't really taking effect, or the staffs just weren't actually doing what they're meant to. So previously you were meant to get a 5, a 15 and 25% chance to proc an extra elemental effect based on that weapon type. So every few hits that you did, one of them might give more longer burning damage. If you was using the fresh staff, you might get an additional 30% movement slowdown. Or if you was using sour, it would give 10 additional stun damage. But that only happened 5, 15 and 25% of the time using whatever staff it was. So now, no matter what staff you use, you're going to get that effect 100% of the time. Spicy will carry on burning with every shot. Fresh will add a slowdown speed of 10, 20 and 30 depending on the level. The burn effect is going to obviously be increased depending on what level you're on. Level 1 is 25 extra burn damage, level 2 is 50 extra burn damage, and level 3 75. Fresh, you'll slow down creatures by 10, 20 and 30 depending on level, and Sour is going to add 2, 4 and 6 stun damage. Now that seems like a low amount for stun damage, but remember this is every time you use a Sour staff now. And even better, at level 3, the mastery of it means you'll get more of a stamina cost reduction. Each one will be 50% less in cost. So that should mean you're able to fire off a lot more shots. It's still going to be a little bit painful getting to that level 3. I feel like that buff is pretty cool, but it would have been nice to see that go up in levels. Really, the idea of all these weapon changes is to really make you concentrate on becoming a Blade Master. Choosing a class and really sticking with it so you get the benefits. Whereas previously, there wasn't really much difference between some of the increases. It certainly didn't make it worth it trying to kill 200 creatures with a spear or a blade if that was something that you never liked using. And that is it. All the rest of the mutations haven't really changed, but obviously you can stack some of these a lot better now. Things like Truffle Tussle with Little Fist means you're going to be doing an incredible amount of damage, especially when you get the power droplet. Grounded is effectively saying choose a weapon, stick with it and see an actual proper reward for making you a master of a spear, a dagger or a bow. Early suggestions from some of the data miners in Discord pretty much show across the board lots of mutations and lots of combat and weapons have all received some sort of buff. It's pretty fair to say they want the game to be a little bit more easier and have you being able to take out bugs a bit quicker and in more fun ways. Now for hardcore players you might be like, nah, the game's still pretty too easy for me. But remember, the general populace of Grounded are fairly new to the game. So many people picked it up with 1.0 or returned after not playing it for a while. And so obviously the feedback they've received overwhelmingly must have been that it's simply just too hard to progress, too hard to kill, or not worth it getting some of these later mutations. I'm sure there might be some more balance changes before the 1.1 update is out for everyone. And if there is, I'll do another video correcting anything. But right now it's making combat more fun, more useful, and really making a style of play more viable. Agree, disagree, let me know what you think. Have you played around with the PTB stuff already? What do you think is the best buff for a mutation in that? Is it going to encourage you to mess around with new weapons now? And that's it, I'm off. I'll see you ratbags later.